There's a lot to get to, so let me welcome to the program Antony Davies. He's an associate professor of economics at Duquesne University and a research fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. Professor Davies, I actually read the report. Oddly, this one is not that hard to read, and it is the complete opposite of the June CBO report on amnesty and everything the president's been saying. Yes.
Yeah, this is correct. One of the things we need to be very careful about, this report is saying that the debt held by the public is going to be 100% of GDP in 35 or 25 years. Debt held by the public ignores the money the federal government has borrowed from Social Security and Medicare trust funds. If you add that in, we're already at 105% of GDP, total debt.
The wide swing they give for 25 years was 65% of GDP to 156% of GDP. Investors Business Daily said that their research shows a possible 190% of GDP. None of this is going in the right direction.
Yeah, now I've gone back and I've looked at CBO reports going back into the 1990s. If you compare CBO's projections to what actually happened, what you find is that their 10-year out projection, forget about the 20, their 10-year out projections of the federal debt are typically off by a factor of 5. That is, the federal debt ends up being 5 times more than what CBO projects.
How is this, I mean, I even get lost in some of this quantitative easing stuff, but when they devalue the currency at the rate they're devaluing it at, how do they plan a recovery with a weak dollar?
Yeah, well, you don't plan a recovery. What you plan on is that the ton of bricks comes down on the next guy's head. That, it stays up there as long as you're in office. And this is what's happening. The Congress and the White House have been kicking this can down the road. And it's not just the Obama administration, it's the administrations before him as well. They keep kicking it down the road, hoping that when the ton of bricks comes down, they're safely out of office.
I don't like to insult people. I mean, we were showing that Reuters Ipsos poll that only 27% of people polled even knew what quantitative easing is. Can you just give me a quick explanation?
Yeah, well, this term, quantitative easing, it's very smart they come up with this. This is not an economic term. This was invented, and what it basically means is they're printing money. When the federal government, or the Federal Reserve in this case, prints money, what it does is it drains the purchasing power out of your dollars. Every dollar they print means your dollar buys less. It's basically theft.
Yeah, so when we look at these trajectories over the next 25 years and the potential influx of tens of millions of low to no skill workers, coupled with the fact that automation and robotics are replacing people, even if you tried to save your money right. Might not buy you anything.
That's absolutely right. And you're starting to see it with the energy prices, the price of gas and so forth. When we start to see all prices going up, this is the effect of the quantitative easing finally coming down and forcing us to pay the price, which is the higher prices of everything we buy.
I hate to be one of these kooky conservatives when I say this, but I get irritated when I see left-wing economists and pundits just blithely writing off the increasing price in gold, silver, platinum, palladium. Obviously, if gold is $200 an ounce a decade ago, or was $200 a decade ago, and now is pushing around $2,000, then came back to about $1,400, you got to ask what's going on with your currency.
Right. That's absolutely right. And you don't even need to look at the gold. Just look at the tremendous amount of money the Federal Reserve has pumped into banks. Bank reserves are something like 36 times what they were prior to the Great Recession.
Would it have just been easier to go ahead and do like a Cypriot sort of just, well, we're just going to, the banks are all just going to take back 5% of the stuff you deposited. It's the bank's money now, and now they're going to lend it out and hope for the best.
Well, this is correct. And the thing we have to be careful of is, Cyprus and Greece, both their economies started to melt down when the federal debt reached about 120% of GDP. If you include what we borrowed from Social Security, we're currently at 105% of GDP.
Can you help me understand? I'm not I host this program, but I'm not Paul Krugman or Christina Romer or Robert Reich. These people just dismiss this stuff when the CBO says that the path that we're on with current law is unsustainable. How did these people just write this off as something, nothing to see here, move along, don't worry, Medicaid and
Right.
Social Security are fine.
They're hoping that people don't read the CBO report. I've gone back, I've read many of these reports. This report in particular is incredibly blunt in stating in very black and white terms the problems that we're facing. And this is despite the fact that the CBO is required by law to incorporate whatever rosy projections Congress gives them. Despite that, they're still coming out with a very black and white warning.
All right, I'm gonna ask a serious question here. What is the actual breaking point? Because I wrote it into my monologue that it's very, very bad if you find yourself at 100% of GDP. Because my fear, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that if I'm thinking of the Laffer curve, if 100% taxation is required, you'll have collapse. If you don't tax at all, you have collapse. What is the actual breaking point of debt to GDP?
Right. I don't know the answer to that, and clearly it varies.
So
by
100's bad,
economy
though.
and what's
100's
going on.
bad. 100's really bad.
100's clearly bad, but what I can tell you is eventually you reach a point at which it becomes mathematically impossible for the federal government ever to pay off its debt. And I can tell you we're not far from that point.
Yeah, and when it gets to the point where work actually produces nothing, you have a big problem. Now we're saying, for all this talk of the recovery, poverty in this country is increasing, even with all the wealth redistribution, and gas prices are still killing the average consumer.
Right. And poverty is increasing because of the wealth redistribution. The best thing the federal government can do is get out of the picture. Individual people who are on the ground, the individual workers, the individual students, the individual business owners, they know what's best for them far better than some bureaucrat in Washington does. If the federal government wants the economy to turn around and wants incomes to rise for everybody, the best thing it can do is step out of the way and let the American people do what they do best.
It looks like for all the worry that the sequester cuts were going to bring an end, bring on the zombie apocalypse, it looks like, according to this CBO report, that the government's not going to have a choice. It's either going to bankrupt itself. For all the worry that we're going to default on the debt, again, if debt hits 100% of GDP, you can't pay it off. So it looks like cuts are coming, very painful ones, whether Barack Obama and the progressive Democrats believe it or not.
Yeah, this is right. And the way I describe it is you can't beat the laws of mathematics. If Washington doesn't fix our problem, the laws of mathematics are going to do it for them.
Yeah, here's one more thing. Debt ceiling, coming up on it, days. The president said back when we had $9 trillion in debt that raising the ceiling was unpatriotic. Now we're at 17. If 9 is bad, 17 sounds a lot worse. How much higher could it possibly go?
Yeah, this is the interesting thing. The argument we always hear is we need to raise the debt ceiling, because where government's going to stop operating. The fact of the matter is, every time we give Washington another dollar, they find a way to spend $1.20. The best way to stop this cycle is to cut off the fuel, and the fuel is the tax dollars and the borrowed dollars that Washington gets hold of.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me on the program. Coming
My pleasure. Thank you.